At a restaurant, Casey sits alone during her classmate's party. Birthday girl Claire complains about Casey to her parents, saying these are the consequences of pity invites. She talks about the rumors surrounding Casey, like her running away from home often and causing too much trouble at school. Casey's guardian can't pick her up because the car broke down, so Claire's father volunteers to drive her home. Casey and Claire get in the car with Marcia while Claire's father puts all the gifts and leftover food in the trunk. At that moment, he's approached by someone. Claire hears a weird noise and when she looks in the mirror, she sees the leftovers on the ground. Suddenly Dennis gets on the driver's seat, puts on a mask, and sprays a sedative on Claire's and Marcia's faces to knock them out. Casey slowly moves her hand to open the door, but the car makes a beeping sound and Dennis knocks her out too. Sometime later, the girls wake up in a strange room. As they wonder what happened to Claire's dad, Dennis comes in and puts down a chair, which he cleans before sitting. He looks at the girls for a few seconds and announces that he chooses Marcia first. As Dennis drags her from the bed, Marcia struggles to free herself, and Casey tells her to pee herself. Marcia isn't strong enough to escape Dennis' hold and he takes her out of the room before closing the door. Marcia screaming no over and over can be heard through the door and a desperate Claire rushes to pound on it to no avail. Eventually Dennis opens the door, hitting Claire in the process. He leaves Marcia on the bed and makes some weird noises of disgust before leaving. Marcia explains that he wanted her to dance for him and peeing herself effectively kept him away. Casey dissociates from the situation by thinking about her childhood. Her Uncle John was telling the story of a huge deer he encountered, and her father reminded Casey of the right spot to shoot while hunting. Meanwhile, the news of the girl's kidnapping is already on TV. Claire's father is fine and went to the police as soon as he woke up. Dr. Karen is watching the news but she rushes to her computer when she gets an email from someone named Barry asking her for an urgent therapy session. Back to the girls, Claire wants to make a plan to attack Dennis together, but Casey points out that he's so strong that he'll easily knock them down. She thinks getting hurt will only make their chances of escaping worse. An argument ensues so Casey escapes into her memories again, remembering more hunting lessons from her father. Sometime later Karen is visited by Dennis, although she calls him Barry. He's brought her a bunch of clothing designs he's made, and his demeanor is much relaxed and friendly. Barry talks about many different topics so Karen keeps mentioning the email, wondering if something happened. Suddenly Barry's mannerisms change and he says the email was just a moment of weakness, so he's leaving. Karen is suspicious because he's not taking his sketches back, so he grabs them and thanks her for fighting for them. In the locked room, the girls are spying through the cracks in the wood and notice that a woman is talking to Dennis. Suddenly the door opens and Patricia appears, but he's just Dennis in a dress. It turns out he has dissociative identity disorder, and during his visit with Karen, he went from Barry to Dennis on the spot. Patricia promises the girls that he'll talk to Dennis and that he isn't allowed to touch them. In the meantime, Karen tries to get a spot in an important mental health conference, but she's denied because nobody accepts her research. The other doctor thinks that Karen treats Barry's personalities like they're supernaturally gifted, when it's just trauma. Karen insists she has brain scans that prove that Barry's body chemistry changes with each personality, but she's still not taken seriously. Later at home Karen looks at all his files on Barry, revealing a particular drawing of a beast. The girls wonder if Dennis is really crazy or if it's just a plan to lower their guards. At that moment Dennis comes in with cleaning products and makes the girls clean the bathroom. He explains that Patricia reminded him they were brought here because they're sacred food, and he promises not to bother them again. That night, the girls wake up to find their kidnapper sitting at the door. He introduces himself as Hedwig and says he's 9 years old. Hedwig tells them that someone is on the move and that person will come to do awful things to the girls. Noticing that he truly has the innocence of a child, Casey acts friendly toward him and convinces him to come closer. Hedwig reveals that Dennis chose the girls many days ago and stalked them until he found an opening to kidnap them. Then Casey starts lying, telling him that she overheard Patricia and Dennis deciding that Hedwig would be the next victim. Hedwig cries because the others think he's stupid, so Casey continues the manipulation. She says that the girls are his babysitters and promises to let him watch TV, but to do that Hedwig has to get them out. This makes him rant about making the room safe and leaves the room, locking the door behind him. Thinking about those last words, Casey notices that the drywall is new. The girls start pounding on all the walls and the ceiling until they find a hollow panel. Claire begins hitting it with her shoe, destroying the panel until she finds some metal bars. At that moment Hedwig comes back and tries to open the door, so Marcia and Casey push it to keep it closed while Claire continues to make the hole bigger. The metal bars turn out to be a vent duct lid, so Claire removes it to climb inside the ceiling. Hedwig disappears for a few seconds and comes back as Dennis, who is strong enough to push the door open. At the same time Claire crawls through the vents until she finds another lid, which she pushes off to fall into a maintenance room. She runs through a corridor until she finds a changing room and when she hears a voice yelling, she hides inside a locker. Dennis runs by and Claire thinks she's safe, however he soon appears in front of the locker and forces her to come out. Noticing the stains on Claire's sweater, Dennis forces her to take it off before locking her up in another room. Then Dennis covers the ceiling hole while telling Casey and Marcia they won't see Claire again because he'll keep them apart. Casey's shirt is dirty, so he takes it before leaving. The next day Karen finally gets to present her research at the conference. She explains the physical differences between different identities in the same body, like one of them being allergic to something while the others aren't. She also shares the example of a patient who was writing things with both hands at the same time, but a different identity controlled each hand. Karen wonders if people with dissociative identity disorder have unlocked the potential of the brain and perhaps even discovered how to access the supernatural. Later Barry visits Karen after sending her another urgent email. Karen can tell this is another personality pretending to be Barry, but he keeps denying it. Then Karen reveals that his guy has 23 identities and uses the knowledge she has of all of them to conclude she's talking to Dennis. She never met him before because Barry banned him since Dennis likes making girls dance for him without clothes. Dennis has OCD and Karen guessed this is him because he kept arranging her things. She also reveals that Patricia is supposed to be banned too because she's also unstable. A panicking Dennis insists he's Barry and stains his clothes on purpose before running out. Afterward Karen checks the security cameras and sees her patient walk right through the trash. Normal people would have walked around it, so Karen concludes that was indeed Dennis trying to put up an act. In the room, Marcia wants to work together to think of a plan, but Casey is lost in her memories again. She remembers watching the deer her family killed and her father telling her that the thrill comes from outsmarting the animal. Sometime later, Casey wakes up from her nap to find Patricia in the room. She's brought food for the girls and flowers for their hair. He even volunteers to brush Casey's. Since the duo has been behaving, Patricia decides they can leave the room for a while. He takes them down a creepy corridor and into the kitchen. Marcia asks if Claire can come too, but Patricia refuses because Claire almost ruined the big reception. Then Patricia turns around to make more food. Marcia uses the chance to raise her chair and hit Patricia with it before running through another door. When Patricia tries to follow her, Casey pushes the table to block him. However, Patricia has a knife and threatens Casey until she agrees to go back to her room. Meanwhile, Marcia is stuck in another room because the next door is locked. Sadly, Patricia appears behind her and threatens her with the knife. Afterward, Patricia locks Marcia up in the room. Casey is then visited by Dennis, who tells her that the beast will come for her and asks her to take off her shirt because there are crumbs on it. After dreaming about her uncle again, Casey wakes up to find Hedwig cuddling her. He scolds Casey for her lies before explaining how the personalities work. Everyone has to wait and Barry decides who stands in the light. However, Barry lost that power because of Hedwig, who can come out whenever he wants. Now Hedwig is keeping Barry in the dark, which allows Dennis and Patricia to come out more. They believe in the beast, but Hedwig never saw him. He asks Casey if he can kiss her and when she says yes, he gives her a clumsy peck. Then Hedwig tells her about his love for music and how he loves dancing by the window in his room, so Casey wonders if they could dance together. However, Hedwig gets upset because he can tell she's trying to trick him again. To connect with him, Casey shares that she gets in trouble at school on purpose so she can get away from everyone when they send her to detention. This makes Hedwig agree to take her to his room, but he must wait until there's an opening. Later Barry visits Karen, who received an email from him in the middle of the night for an emergency session. She's frustrated because he keeps talking about fabrics instead of serious things, so she brings up an incident he had at work. One day, 2 high schoolers came up to him and grabbed his hands to put them on a naughty place before running back to their friends. They were laughing because it had been a dare. All the personalities Karen met said they were fine with this silly prank, but Karen believes the incident brought back memories of the abuse Barry went through as a child. She knows she's talking to Dennis again and says she understands that he took over to protect the others. Karen has heard the stories about the beast, who supposedly is horrifying and has amazing powers. She thinks Dennis and Patricia made those stories up to keep the other personalities at bay, so again she explains she understands the need for protection and assures him she won't judge any of the personalities because she wants to help them all. This causes Dennis to stop pretending he's Barry. He explains that he and Patricia are ridiculed by the others, and that he didn't send the emails. Karen is happy to finally meet him and brings up the subject of the beast again, pointing out that nobody has ever seen him, which means this mythical 24th personality is just a fantasy to cope. When the man returns home, Hedwig takes over the body and brings Casey out to guide her to his room. He plays music and starts dancing in a disturbing way, so Casey pretends she likes it. She wonders where the window he mentioned is and he reveals he was talking about a drawing. A desperate Casey asks Hedwig to help her get out, but Hedwig says nobody will make fun of him again when the beast comes and asks Casey to return to her room. Casey starts crying as she begs for help, so Hedwig gives her a walkie-talkie. When she turns it on, she hears a voice and immediately answers. Hedwig tries to stop her, so Casey slaps him and tells the stranger about her situation. Then Hedwig attacks her with a bat, so Casey dodges it and fights with Hedwig until she can throw him off. She tries the radio again, but the man thinks this is just some prank. At that moment, Patricia appears and takes back the walkie-talkie before guiding Casey back to her room. While he leaves to change outfits, Casey notices that a nail fell from the door and immediately grabs it. Then her kidnapper comes back as Dennis, who explains that the beast is a sentient creature who represents the highest form of human evolution. He considers asking Casey for her shirt but doesn't, claiming it's a sacred night. Another flashback reveals that Uncle John took little Casey to the middle of the forest so they could play to be animals. Since animals don't wear clothes, Casey agrees to take off hers, which is John's manipulation to abuse her. Later when they return to the tents, a traumatized Casey points a gun at John, who quickly takes it from her hands. In the present, Casey has a breakdown because she thinks she'll die soon. Meanwhile, Karen finds dozens of emails from Barry saying they need her. She rushes to the man's home and finds Dennis, who agrees to let her in when she calls him extraordinary. Dennis takes Karen to Barry's room, confirming that this place has a room for every personality. He explains that he remembers all the abuse his mother put this body through and that the Dennis personality was born with OCD because keeping everything spotless would keep his mother from getting angry. Dennis also explains that he lied about never meeting the Beast. The 24th personality is indeed real, very powerful, and on the move. Since Karen is getting very scared, she pretends she's very fascinated by all this and that she needs to take notes, so they should continue the chat in her office tomorrow. Before leaving, she asks for the bathroom, and on her way out she puts a tissue in the keyhole. As she walks down the corridor, Karen sees a bolted door and opens it to find Claire. The girl asks for help, but before a shocked Karen can react, Dennis closes the door and sedates Karen with the spray. He then locks her up in another room. While Dennis leaves to buy some flowers, Claire talks loudly so Marcia can hear her in the neighboring room. She tells her that someone has come for them, so they must find a way to escape. Searching the shelves, Marcia finds a hanger and pushes it over the door to try to get the bolt. Meanwhile, Casey uses the nail on the lock until she manages to open it. She finally leaves the room, but the next door is locked. She then tries the computer, however it doesn't have an internet connection. She starts opening a bunch of video files and finds a clip for each of the personalities. Barry admits he's worried because lately the others have been trying to take over. At the subway station, Dennis puts down the flowers and enters an empty train car. After taking off his shirt, his body starts going through some changes and finally becomes the Beast. Suddenly he climbs on the roof and jumps off. Outside the tunnel, a police dog begins to bark like crazy. However, the Beast is moving in the shadows as he crosses the neighborhood. When he reaches his home, he jumps over the gate instead of using the keys. Back to Marcia, she finally manages to reach the bolt with the hanger and opens it. In the other room, Karen wakes up and starts writing a note. She's still dizzy from the sedative, so her vision is blurry, but she manages to grab a knife from a table when the Beast comes inside. He thanks Karen for helping them for so long and grabs her from behind, so Karen tries to stab him multiple times. However, his body has become so powerful that the knife just breaks. The Beast closes his arms tightly around Karen, squeezing her until her spine breaks and she dies. Casey is still watching the videos and notices Barry taking the keys from the hanger. She goes to the same spot and finds them under a hat. Now she can finally leave the room and search the corridor for her friends. When she looks into Marcia's room, Casey is horrified to find her dead on the ground with a nasty wound on her stomach. She hears a noise in the neighboring room and opens it to see Claire, who is suddenly dragged behind some furniture. Casey takes a closer look and discovers the Beast eating Claire's organs, so she rushes out and locks the door. Afterward, Casey starts searching for an exit and finds Karen's body together with the note. She reads, "Say his name, Kevin Wendell Crumb." The Beast easily bends the bolt to escape and comes into the next room by crawling on the walls. Casey begins repeating his real name, causing him to fall and get dizzy until he passes out. A flashback shows that little Kevin was beaten up by his mother, who would use his full name every time she scolded him. When he wakes up, Kevin is back in charge of his body. He's shocked to see Karen dead and Casey explains he killed her. Kevin cries as he asks for the date and realizes he's been in the darkness for 2 years. Tired of hurting people, he tells Casey where to find his secret gun and the bullets, asking her to end it all. At that moment, the body starts jumping from personality to personality, and they all ask Casey not to kill them. Eventually Dennis takes control, so Casey rushes to find the gun in the secret spot. She tries using the real name again, but it doesn't have an effect anymore. Dennis announces that the Beast is ready and falls to his knees to start transforming again, so Casey leaves the room and runs down the corridor until she finds the changing room. After getting the bullets from a locker, Casey continues to run, only to suddenly be tackled by the Beast. He bites her leg and rips her shirt off while she loads the gun. When she gets ready to shoot, the Beast disappears. Eventually she finds a door and has a breakdown because it's locked. A flashback reveals that her dad died when she was a kid and her Uncle John became her guardian, which means he's abused her for years at home. The Beast crosses the corridor by crawling on the ceiling and breaking every light. Casey tries shooting him, but he moves too fast and dodges the bullet, so she hides inside a cage instead. She tries shooting again to no avail, and the Beast says he can't be hurt by bullets. This doesn't stop her from firing a few more times, bringing the Beast to his knees. There are wounds on his body from the shot, but he still recovers quickly and uses his superhuman strength to bend the cage bars. At that moment, the Beast sees the scars on Casey's body from all those years of abuse. He says she's different from the rest and that her heart is pure, so he laughs and walks away, leaving Casey crying in the cage. In the morning, a man finds Casey and finally brings her out. She discovers that her kidnapper lives in the basement of the zoo where he worked as a guard. Soon the police arrive and the paramedics take care of Casey. The cops search every room but they can't find Kevin. In an abandoned building in the slums, the personalities talk to each other while staring at the wounds they've survived. They realize this power will make the world finally take them seriously.
Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you on my next video.